All right. We're here today with Mike Malloy, and we're going to hear an interesting story. So, Mike, will you just quickly kind of say hello and introduce yourself here?
Yep. Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me today. I'm Mike Malloy. I'm an adjunct professor, entrepreneur resident here at Georgetown, and happy to share a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey. And so I grew up in Maryland. I studied math and computer science in undergrad at Boston College. Got a job at Deloitte Consulting right out of undergrad. Was there for 4 years. Deloitte was kind enough to pay for me to go to Georgetown so I could get my master's in computer science. And while I was in grad school, I followed the typical career path from computer scientist to traveling sunglasses salesman and social entrepreneur. And so,
Whoa. All right.
yeah,
Definitely the right turn there. So let's talk about that. Okay. Oh, we got the
we got the
props.
props too. Yeah.
Very nice. So I remember when I first met you, you were selling sunglasses. And so,
Yep.
so you didn't create this company. Talk about how you became a sunglasses salesman.
Absolutely. So I was actually the second entrepreneur, or sorry, the second employee at Waveborn. I wasn't the founder or the co-founder. I was hired as the director of business development. I actually heard about it from an email newsletter that came out in summer of 2011, and they just launched, and it was kind of buy some shades, give some glasses, a buy one give one model similar to Tom's shoes. I was like, this is great. I've got a year left of grad school. I didn't have any classes during the summer. I'd also had an ex-girlfriend who broke up with me, so I had some time on my hands and wanted to see what I could do to help this social enterprise sunglass company. And so I just emailed getinvolved@waveborn.com and was like, hey, I'm studying computer science. Like, what can I do to help? Met with the founder. We had dinner in DuPont Circle and hired me on the spot. And I didn't get paid anything. We eventually said, all right, we'll give you some sales commission if you can sell some sunglasses. And for the next year, we both worked on this on nights and weekends. So I had a day job at Deloitte. I was taking some grad classes. I was playing Ultimate Frisbee at Georgetown. But from like 7 to 2 in the morning, I was building Waveborn and figuring out how to update the website and build marketing materials, different kind of direct-to-consumer sales strategies.
Let's talk about the sunglasses real quick. So you showed us a pair there. You had a variety of models. They were not all
No, these are
neon.
the most flamboyant pink ones here. We started with one model in 3 different colors. Had that for the first couple of years. It was kind of a classic Wayfarer look. They were handcrafted in Milan, Italy by skilled artisans. We had polarized and mirror lenses. And we started with a buy one, give one model, donate reading glasses. After a few years, that expanded to actually fund sight restoring cataract surgeries with 10% of our profits for every pair sold. And we expanded into 9 styles, 25, and eventually up to about 150 different styles, which I learned so much, Jeff, that I had no idea about. Nobody taught me the complexities of having 150 SKUs versus 3, and all the different product photos and descriptions and getting them up on Amazon, our website, all these other things, storing them in a third-party logistics warehouse, a lot that goes into a business that I kind of learned as we were building and flying the plane, if you will.
Well, and how did you go from being unpaid employee number one to CEO and essentially owner of the business?
Yeah, so one was I worked real hard, and I did it for a long time at Deloitte. And then as I graduated in 2012 in my master's, I put in my 6-week notice and I moved to the beach in Dewey Beach, Delaware to sell sunglasses. And I was 25 and single. It was a great stage of life. Mom and dad were not super thrilled about the career choice to leave the high-paying government consulting job, but I knew it was going to work out great. And I was, the sky was the limit. And so I kept working for about a year full-time as the director of business development. The founder, Jonathan, eventually went to work on another startup, and I was basically running it for about a year until he decided to sell me the business. And basically, he had invested his wedding money to self-fund it and started. So we kind of, he broke even with that, and I paid him $1, and he sold me the company. So I was then the CEO. We had raised some money from investors that kind of converted there. They each got 1% in the business. So we raised about, I think, 40K that first Christmas. And then we did a crowdfunding campaign. And April 23rd, 2013, top 5 best days of my life. And our goal was to raise $10,000 in 45 days. And we did it in less than a day and a half. And that was a big, whoa, okay, like there's a market here. This is exciting. We were on the homepage of Indiegogo. And from there, the company kind of took off. We raised some money from investors, and over the next few years, I went on to raise over $500,000 from 27 different investors, friends, family, some high net worth individuals, a lot of Georgetown alums, and people who almost all of them knew me for at least a year, if not a couple of decades in my life. These were not strangers and large venture capitalists. They were people saying, hey, Mike, here's 5, 10, 25K that I want to put in. I believe in you. I think you'll figure out a way to make this work. And well, we'll talk about how that played out.
What were some of the high points of running this business?
So lifestyle design, such that I could go anywhere in the world that it was sunny and call it a business trip. And so for 6 years, every January, I went out to California and would do a trip typically from like San Francisco all the way down to San Diego. I'd stop in Santa Monica for a big beach ultimate frisbee tournament every Martin Luther King Day weekend. There's a few summers where like I was again like became a traveling sunglasses salesman. Like I rented a white van, filled it with sunglasses and displays, and would drive out to Ocean City, Maryland, go up Route 1. I'd go to Bethany, Rehoboth, take the Lewis ferry over to Cape May, do the whole Jersey Shore. And we were selling to surf shops, eye doctors' offices. We were doing trade shows. Went out to Vegas a couple times, to New York City. We were like one of the 50 hottest startups in the country with Tech Cocktail, and ended up in Vegas. And we also did a deal with a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback as our company spokesperson. And so recorded some commercials with him on a green screen and got to see some Super Bowl rings. And that was pretty cool.
Awesome. All right. But not everything was cool.
No, Jeff,
that quarterback, I know you may not want to name him, but the deal didn't work out well for the business, right? And what were some of the challenges? I guess I'll let you kind of talk about some of the things that happened that weren't so great.
Ultimately, I learned that there's for profits, there's non-profits, and then there's no profits. And on our way to figuring out that bottom one there, a lot of it dealt with the cash conversion cycle with the business. And I was a comp sci guy. I was also a math major. Like I was very good at math my whole life, but nobody ever taught me the business side of it. And that if I had to pay Italy in January and I didn't get the sunglasses to April and then I delivered them in May, I thought retail stores would pay me when I handed them products. You'd pay me. And literally the first time I dropped them off at a surf shop in OC, the owner was like, cool, we'll pay you net 30. And I said, okay, great. He said, yeah, I'll see you in 30 days. And I went out to my car and I Googled, what does net 30 mean? And it means they get the stuff and they have 30 days to pay us. And I was like, okay. So then I came back 30 days later and they're like, oh, it's been raining a lot. Like our sales have been down. Like, can we pay after 4th of July? And I was like, okay. And I'm like a little small company, a few people, but like I was kind of beholden to that. They didn't pay in July. They ended up paying like end of September, which meant that was like 9 months where I didn't have the cash from this inventory to then reinvest in the business. That led to a lot of struggles, especially the seasonal nature of the business, where we did, we sold online as well. We had cash for the summer months, but every winter for 4 years, we ran out. And we didn't just like get close to zero. We like got into the negatives. And like there was a period where I convinced the bank to like have a check go through, but then it took 126 days for our bank account to get back into the black. And so I literally didn't have a piece of plastic in my wallet from personal or company finances that I could use. I remember going to Baltimore to go to an event and the parking meter would only accept cards. And I did have some quarters, but it didn't accept that. And I was like, well, I guess I'll get a $30 ticket that I'm not going to pay because there was no way that I could do it. And there was a period where like I was scared to leave the house because I didn't have $20 of cash. And if I had to pay for parking or I needed to get something to eat, like I wasn't sure how to do that or how to put gas in the car. And there's a scarcity mindset that went into that. There was definitely some, self-doubt, and Mike Malloy was Waveborn. Waveborn was Mike Malloy. Like they were not separated. And, one of the really important lessons that I teach entrepreneurs, and I think it's important for your students, is like learning how to separate how you're doing personally from how you're doing professionally. And you can fail, or a business can fail, and that doesn't mean you are a failure. And it took some therapy and working with a leadership coach and support from friends and family to like come out of that and realize like, oh, my friends are still my friends, and even if my business is not a massive multi-million-dollar success like it may have looked like on my Instagram feed.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to share the story. And I know that it was painful. I remember talking to you several times during that period. Uh, can you talk through the mechanics, right? So you described kind of one of the fundamental challenges was that cash cycle, right? You could sell a lot of sunglasses, but it wasn't, you weren't making enough profit to be able to reinvest, and you had investors giving you money. And I remember there were a couple of kind of Hail Marys. You're like, okay, this has been challenging for a couple of years. We've seen the same pattern, but we're going to get the quarterback to endorse this, or some other kind of key things. But ultimately, it got to the point where you had to make a decision to shut things down. Talk about what that period was like. What were the mechanics of what happened, both the business and and you personally?
For sure. And so it was hard, and like my number one strength is positivity. So like I always thought we were going to make it. I was always like, oh, the next thing, we're going to close this deal, we got this new opportunity, it'll be a 6-figure thing, it's going to be great. Didn't come through. Or oh, we had 9 meetings with this investor group, they're going to put in $250,000 to $500,000. 9th meeting, they're like, actually, we're out. And I was like, oh, like that was and I've been telling people, oh, I'm going to pay you, give me 2 weeks, I'll have the money. And then ultimately it was like July 27th, that summer of 2016. I had a come to Jesus conversation with Dave Terzian. He's another entrepreneur resident, a good friend. It was, I think, after like a summer launch program, we were catching up, and I just like, Dave, like, I don't see any path where like I'm going to suddenly have $500,000. And another lesson that I learned was, we had raised all this money on what's called a convertible note, which means on a certain date, it will convert into equity based on certain things. And if not, you're going to default, and then you kind of owe people the money. I had structured them all to convert on my 30th birthday. And I would not recommend anybody structure convertible notes on your birthday or any important day in your life.
So you thought that would be a positive milestone celebration?
Private island, definitely a yacht. Like there were all sorts of, visions in my 25 to, 29-year-old head. Ultimately, at that point, I had broken up with another girlfriend. I had to pay double rent for 6 months with no furniture because she took all the furniture. I literally had a folding chair and like a folding table, and that was it in the whole place. And sunglasses. I had a lot of sunglasses wealth. But I had to move out of that place. I was living in my parents' basement at 30. And after talking to Dave, decided like, we need to go bankrupt. Like we need to shut down the company. I need to figure out, what does Chapter 7 business bankruptcy mean? I had to talk to some lawyers. Ironically, the lawyers cost like $1,500, which I didn't have, but we said we'll figure that out. And I hadn't gotten a paycheck in 4 years, so I started applying to jobs. And as we'll kind of get into that in a minute, but I had to call up 27 investors and have a really hard conversation with them. And I initially thought, oh, I'll do it in like a few days, we'll wrap it up, no big deal. I could do 2, maybe 3 of those a day, and then I was emotionally drained. Like it spent it. I had an agenda and kind of a script that I would cover, and a couple good things that I will share. If you have to deliver bad news to somebody, don't bury the lead. Bottom line up front. And I found the phrase, hey Jeff, I just want to go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. That was like the first thing I would say, and people praise like, oh, the hair's going to get pulled. And I'd say, Waveborn Inc. is going to file for Chapter 7 business bankruptcy. We're shutting down the business. Unfortunately, there's going to be no financial return on your investment. The silver lining is that I can give you a letter for capital losses that you can submit with your taxes, so it'll balance out capital gains you have over the next 20 years. And I'd love to spend the next 28 minutes telling you what we learned, the impact we had along the way, and sort of what the future holds, and answer any questions you might have. And I was terrified to make some of those calls. I did start with some of the most friendly folks first, and that was helpful to like figure out a little bit of what was being said, but I didn't know how people were going to react. And the outpouring of support and love, and like people genuinely worried about me, and like I was like, yeah, they lost 10, 20K, whatever, but like, oh shit, like you're in this. This is probably pretty hard for you. Like, how are you doing? And I remember one of my good friends from Georgetown, I was on the Frisbee team with me, said, he's like, Mike, you would have to do something way worse than lose money to have any impact on our friendship. Like, of course, next time I see you, we can still go have a beer and hang out. And, I was deliberate on the front end when people invested to always tell them like, hey, this is a risky investment. It may not work out. And I want to make sure, like, if we do lose all your money, that, like, we can still sit down and have a beer. And I remember we had that Dave Terzian conversation. It was probably a Thursday. That Friday, I got in the car with two of my investors who were Georgetown Frisbee buddies, and we drove to Wildwood, New Jersey for a beach Frisbee weekend together. I told them in the car ride, and they're like, "Hey, let's just, like, go have a good weekend. It's going to be all right. We'll get through this, man."
Hopefully they picked up the tab that weekend.
I believe they did. Yeah. So that was good. And
out of the 27 calls, how many of those went really poorly?
3. So I think there's 3 that I would not say I'm still friends with at this point, and that's pretty good math, I have to say. And and other people, somebody else was like, "Well, let me know when you start your next thing. I'm ready to invest in that, Mike." And I certainly wasn't ready at that point, but that was a good sign. And I have one of the investors is coming down tomorrow. My birthday's in a couple of days. He's coming down to go to a music festival with me this weekend. So yeah.
Awesome. So you said the business had to go through a bankruptcy process. And essentially that means you officially dissolve the business, whatever assets are available kind of gets sold off. And in this case, you sold a lot of sunglasses and tried to pay off debt. But what else was happening? Like, you personally, you're living in your parents' basement.
So living in my parents' basement. I had a black Nissan Rogue. That was technically a company car. And I skipped a step where maybe 6 months earlier, I was like 4 months behind on payments. And they literally knocked on my parents' door like 1 a.m. and were like, "Hey, we're towing your car. Like, get your crap out the trunk if you want it." And then it was, I had to call somebody and like borrow $1,300 to like pay to get it back the next day. I needed the car. But then we went through bankruptcy. I had to turn the car in. That ended up being okay because I did owe a lot of money on it, and I kind of wiped that away and was able to get a 2011 Nissan Rogue that was silver, and I still have, and to this day.
The bankruptcy process, it's designed to allow you to start over, right? I mean,
it is. There's been a tick mark or a flag on my credit report for 7 years to say, "Hey, he went through bankruptcy." But at this point, I'm 37. This was at 30. So like, the other thing that happened, though, was we had about almost $1 million of debt for the business. Mike Malloy had personally guaranteed about $350,000. And Mike Malloy had $300 in his bank account. So I decided in July I was going to do it. I finished the paperwork by December 30th, submitted it all for 2016's tax year, had some court things, went through it. By like May, it was done. And then Mike Malloy had to file for personal bankruptcy on 7/7/17. That took another few months, and it was almost like a 1.5 year process to kind of go through bankruptcy twice. I was able to get a job at Halcyon and start getting a paycheck. I got health insurance, and have bounced back.
Awesome. And let's talk more about that, right? So
yeah,
I remember at this time you had called me. You had been an entrepreneur in residence for us at Georgetown for a couple of years already. You were giving great advice to our students and just a great member of our community and our team. And I remember you called and said, "Hey, my business is going bankrupt. Can I still be an EIR?" And in my opinion was, you're still a smart guy, and you've learned a lot and you're continuing to learn a lot. And so we're glad you've stayed on the team here. But I guess more importantly, like, what has it been like for 7 years kind of bouncing back, right?
For sure. And the irony, Jeff, is like, I'm a better EIR because I went through this. Like, I have a tremendous amount of both scars that I'm sharing a fair amount of it here. I got more, and empathy for entrepreneurs and what that's like, and the mental stress, and like being up in the middle of the night. Oh, how am I going to pay this thing? Like, at one point I had a personal phone and a work phone. I remember both phones were ringing with debt collectors and calling me, and I was like, but I did bounce back. And since that time, about a few months before we filed for bankruptcy, I met a girl. We started dating. We started living together. We got married. I now have a 1.5-year-old son. And we joke that, my wife got in on the ground floor. She did not marry me for my money. She knew after the first few dates, like, oh, he really doesn't like when I order a second glass of wine or an appetizer. Like that bill for dinner. He was like, oh, sweaty. I didn't know why. But I spent 5 years working. We talked about for-profit, nonprofit, no profit at a nonprofit. So I worked at the Halcyon Incubator, helping other social entrepreneurs, go from idea to building these startups and creating a positive impact in the world. And it was kind of the shift from being the rock star guitar frontman on stage to like the bass player singing backup vocals and like making sure the performance went well and coaching them on pitches and connecting them with resources and mentors and potential investors. And I loved it because I was just getting help for other people. And I like to help and to be a servant leader and to, share resources and trainings and things of that nature. So loved Halcyon. And then there was a small global pandemic you all may be familiar with. Yeah. And so when that happened, my wife and I were living in a basement apartment in DC with no natural light. We did not have reliable internet. And suddenly two of us were working from home. And we'd been married for like less than 6 months when that happened. And so that was a pressure test that lasted about 6 months. And we moved to the beach in Delaware. And so we moved to Rehoboth Beach for the winter. And we've now been living in Lewis, about 15 minutes up Route 1 for 2.5 years. And I stayed at Halcyon for a while. They ultimately said, hey, Mike, come back to the office for summer of 21. And that was kind of my forcing function to leave to start Malloy Industries, which I've been running full time. I've been able to teach at Georgetown. I taught remotely during COVID. I now teach asynchronously the startup internship seminar and do a lot of work to connect entrepreneurs with student interns, as well as with investors and fractional executives through my consulting business.
So you've so okay, that's great. So a lot of things have happened.
Yeah.
You've you started a new business, right? That's one of the key things there, right? It took a few years of working for a paycheck.
Yes.
The move kind of forced you to rethink, like, okay, and was it hard to start a new business? And what's maybe different about this one than the last time around?
Yeah. So I learned a lot. The level, or how do I phrase this? When you're 25 and single, it is way easier to quit a job and start doing something entrepreneurial than when you're 34 and married. And I had to make an actual presentation to my wife. I had to have financial projections. I had to have several different ways that I could make money and how this might work out, honey. And ultimately, I even had to have a friend say, hey, Malloy, I work at this well-funded startup. If this thing tanks, I'll get you a job. I'll pay you 6 figures. Tell your wife, you have this safety net. And that was the thing. And she's like, all right, he's definitely going to do that. I was like, yeah, I think he's definitely going to do it. The funny thing is 2.5 years later, that company has failed. It's no longer in business. And I'm still in business doing pretty well. And, have been able to, build a business that has evolved too, and is constantly kind of figuring out where do we fit in the market. It started as kind of the Mike Malloy single shingle. I will help startups with sales, marketing, fundraising. And then, I'm being vulnerable across the board here. 3 months in, my mom, she passed away. And that was September of 21. And a real shock to the system, did not expect it. And the same week that happened, my wife found out she was pregnant. And so a lot of emotions. I took the whole month of September off. I grieved. I was with my dad. And I went back to work in October. I realized I made $0 in September. And that was a sign that this business that I'd been building that was pretty lucrative for the summer wasn't scalable. It wasn't sustainable. And I knew I was going to want to take paternity leave in 8-ish months. And, how do I build it? So I did more than 250 customer discovery interviews. I talked to a ton of entrepreneurs and investors and what now I would call fractional executives on hey, how do we build a marketplace to connect growth stage companies with fractional executives? It's people who are very smart. They have 10, 20, 30 years of experience that can come in for 1, 2, 3 days a week to help these companies grow, but they're not full-time employees. And, that's kind of the great resignation, the post-COVID world. My bet is that's the future of work. And I happen to have a vetted roster of over 200 of them now that we can match with clients.
Awesome. Well, congrats on this latest. You've got your son is one version of a startup. Malloy Industries is another one. And any kind of last words of advice you give to entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs? There's a lot of students I talk to and other people, basically say, being an entrepreneur sounds like fun, but I'm scared about failing. What if it doesn't work, right? What advice do you have for people in that kind of scenario?
Absolutely. One would be to create some safety nets and to, not quit your job on Friday and start something on Monday. but to like have money in a savings account. Like when I quit the first time, I had 10 grand in a savings account that I knew would give me some space and some grace there. And then the other one, Jeff, I had a meeting yesterday with a former Georgetown MBA who's thinking about quitting his corporate job and doing some entrepreneurial things. And, I was like, hey, start making some money in October. If you're going to stay till January 2nd and get a bonus and then, figure out where you're doing, like, how can I help you explore? And it starts with talking to your network, and talking to warm connections, either classmates, people you worked with, friends from home, family, to explore what's out there. I don't think people necessarily have to be the next Mark Zuckerberg and like have a brilliant idea and build it on their own. You can go be the 5th or 25th employee somewhere. Or, I love to throw out the fact that the average millionaire has 7 income streams. So there's not like one job that's just going to make you super duper rich. And it's probably not a startup, by the way. It's probably like real estate investing and a few passive income streams and some lucrative consulting and, a combination of things that, as your students are thinking about how do they get into this world as well, I would also stress the importance of mental health and like having things outside of work, some type of exercise that you sweat and get your body moving to get the endorphins and be resilient. And to also have like hobbies and things you do with friends besides just like drinking and watching football, that give you joy in life, that where you can recharge and at some point shut the laptop, like go outside, and have something to fill up your bucket, so to speak, because it's an emotional roller coaster. And like you have to be resilient. You have to have that mental toughness and that mindset, where you can persevere and overcome whatever those obstacles are going to be. And a big one that we developed at Halcyon was checking in every Monday morning. We had family breakfast and we'd do a lap around and we'd say 1 through 10, how are you doing personally? And 1 through 10, how are you doing professionally? And what's one thing you're grateful for? And on that 1 through 10 scale, there's no 7. So you got to decide, are you a 6 or an 8? And there's that's a big inflection point. And once you cut the 7s out, it's very clear, that, hey, I'm an 8 personally. I had a good weekend. I'm having fun, but I'm like a 4 professionally. I'm, the business isn't doing well. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed with schoolwork, whatever it is. Or, hey, I'm a 9 professionally, but I'm a 2 because my loved one's in the hospital. My significant other broke up with me. And that separation of the 2 will help with the resiliency, when one dips as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing all this. I know there are really tough times that you went through, and a lot of people that go through that are not willing to share. So I really appreciate it. It's great to see you with a lot of sunlight behind you. You might your future looks bright. You might have to wear the shades.
I like that. My wife was literally out the window holding my son, throwing him up in the air, having a good time. So life is good. It moves on. This too shall pass. My dad always says it's a temporary inconvenience when something doesn't go your way.
Awesome. We're glad to have you a part of our community. Glad for sharing your story here today. Thanks, Mike.
Jeff. Thanks.